In 3, 2, 1, we are live. Let's do it. All right, good afternoon, almost evening time, ladies and gentlemen, folks. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. And I know we're slowly but surely getting back into the content. However, it's very lopsided, and I'm trying to feel out what time of day works best for me. And I figured we'd do something a little more later in the day. It's not like our traditional 8 p.m. live streams, but it's not like we're doing it first thing in the morning or in the midst of a work day, especially since today's Monday, first day, truthfully, back from the holidays, more or less. Ethan's Life in the chat already with the super chat. I saw in the top right-hand corner of the chat box there, we can set a goal, and I'm like, well, what do we do? And so I figured we'll do one super chat and see if anybody is kind enough to donate, and Ethan smashed that button as the live stream was getting started. So a big kudos to you, my friend. It's great to have you in here as well, by the way. Time Traveler Karen in Connecticut with us. Scrooge McDuck, great to see you. Brian Davis. Dallin Moore, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that. Dallin Moore. Carmen, good to see you. A number of my OGs in here. Super Charas, Brooke Ward. All right, so give you a quick synopsis before we really dig into this, because I know I don't want to waste a bunch of time. First half, if not first 75% of this stream is going to be talking about this winter weather onslaught that we have unfolding across the United States. It's coming down through Florida right now. We have the front that's working its way through the northern apex of my viewing area with News 6. It's coming through Pinellas and Hillsborough County of Tampa Bay right now. And then we also have the wind chill temperatures coming in that are going to be intense. Very intense. We're going to be waking up with wind chill factors of anywhere between the low to mid 20s across central Florida. And in the further north you go, if you're watching from somewhere else north of Florida, good luck, because it's going to be rough out there with all the winds that are going to be coming in behind this system. And then looking at our water vapor satellite shot here right now, there's our next storm system right here. That's our bowling ball upper cold pocket that's wandering its way through the Four Corners area right now into the desert southwest. So they're probably going to get a nice dusting of snowfall right across the central Rockies, the southern Rockies, get those mountains nice and capped. And then the system's going to kind of get hung up in northern Mexico, and that's what's going to allow the jet stream to sort of build up energy, bide its time before ejecting out over the southernmost area of Texas and developing a surface coastal low. It's kind of interesting. We shall see exactly what unfolds there, but then we also have Winter Storm Blair that has turned into a Type A comma cloud. If you look, we have our snow band right in through here. That's where all your snowfall is currently ongoing, and then you have the jet just screaming right through what's left of the deformation zone, now sheared and plastered out to the right-hand side of the system alongside your warm front. So, if I'm not mistaken, hopefully anyways, all the sleet, freezing rain, and icing accumulation should be just about done up there. We've transitioned to more or less a bona fide snow event. And then we're going to be watching exactly how much of that is going to translate across the Deep South, Dixie Alley, right up into that same general source region as that next system gets underway and tracks off with the easternmost extent of the jet stream over the United States. Here's a quick glance over western CONUS. You can once again see that upper-level cold pocket right there. It's just an upper-level spin. It's like an area of low pressure, except we can't call it a low pressure because it's above that surface level. It's well above us and the first couple thousand feet of the atmosphere. And so that's why we call it a cold pocket, because it's colder than the air around it, and that's why it's sinking down to the south, riding that jet stream. And then just upstream of that, back off towards the west, we have another very powerful branch of the polar front jet just ripping. You could see it, all this mid to upper level moisture just moving across the north central Pacific, south of the Aleutian Island chain, funneling into another strong jet max that's just going to keep this pattern that much more amped up as we go over the next 5, 7, 10 days. Here's a look at the not Storm Prediction Center. I'm so used to saying that. Superchar, as Ethan said, ooh, button, smash button. It was today the first day back to school. Carol Strength, welcome in. Raoul, Oxford, Mississippi, thanks for joining us. The name is right. I always watch your videos and some of your live streams, even if I miss the lives. Well, Dallin, thank you so much for tuning in and being as faithful as you are. Twilight Firefly 100, good to see you, Val. Thank you so much for tuning in today. So these are the latest charts from Weather Prediction Center, and you can see on either side of the country, particularly more so along the front range of the Rockies. And when I say front range, it's just the leading edge of where the terrain really starts to go up as you hit the mountain chain out there. Right through here is where you have your stationary front butting up against that terrain change, and that's what's creating a lot of the snow. We have a bit of an inverted trough and a reflection of that low that's moving through the central Rockies into the Four Corners, the desert Southwest right now, and it's going to run headfirst into all these cold temps already entrenched across pretty much all the way down through almost into Central America, getting into the Caribbean Sea. It's getting ready to pass through the Yucatan Channel, the mouth of the Yucatan Channel between Cuba and the Yucatan Peninsula. That's how far south it's going to go, supported by a 1036 Arctic high, with an even stronger high pressure coming down out of Canada right there. You can see at 1042 millibars. That is cold, it is shallow, and it is slowly moving like molasses in wintertime. As we go to 6 and then 12Z tomorrow morning, you can track the snow band. It looks like WPC wants to start to develop our next frontal system over southern Arizona, kind of just outside the high desert of California, and continue to trudge it off towards the south. Now, I don't know if I agree with this. When I used to do a lot of synoptic analysis in the Air Force, in that same general area, southern Arizona, we would have moments of contention with WPC and what their charts looked like. And I don't know if I agree with a cold front swinging that far south through Mexico and continuing through, like you can see here, with another cold boundary coming down like so. I'd have to look at the jet. I'd have to look at the thickness and see what I can make out of it. And we have those pulled up. But I don't know if I agree with that. But then this is winter storm number 2. This is what's going to create even more havoc for the Deep South, Dixie Alley, the Mid-Atlantic, us here in the Southeast, up in through the Midwest. And the big question on the table is who's going to see snow, who's going to see rain, who's going to see what? And right now, I'm very, very hard-pressed and fairly confident that I really don't think Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and all of them are going to get a ton of snow. Might get some flurries. We might sneak some flurries in there, a trace amount, which means just a nice little salt bay, a snow bay, if you will. Just bringing a little bit of the sprinkling through before we either continue to see freezing precipitation or the sleet, ice pellets, etc. I'll show you some of the SKU-T profiles, and I'll explain why. They're not textbook snow profiles. They're a lot more of that mixed wintry effects to where we're going to be transitioning between a lot of different variations almost. Here's the latest from our winter weather forecast from WPC. This is day 1, day 2, and day 3. You can see the snowfall beginning to go up through northern Texas. Now, I do think Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas are really going to see some good snow. The southern plains will receive some good snow from this. This is day 4 with that snow swath continuing to move up towards the north and east, with that combination of sleet. If you look down here at the color table, probability of melted snow with sleet. So this is a combination of the two that we're seeing here now. And you can see as this event begins to transpire and traject itself off towards the east-northeast, we're going to have a large area under the influence of seeing some pretty hazardous winter weather, whether it be snow, strictly just icing over, freezing over, or that freezing rain that'll help to pile up the icing and the layers of ice and cause damage and power outages. And what I'm a little concerned about is the fact that we just had Blair do something like this, drop a ton of snow to the north, and now this system's going to come through and compound on the areas who either got a lot of the icing and a lot of the slick roadways just freezing over. They're going to get the snow now, and maybe a little bit of an extension to the northern or the southern base of where that current snowfall is at now. This is just another quick glance at the freezing rain accumulation, and look at how much their models are predicting, or at least I should say their probability charts are highlighting for the Southern Plains and Dixie Alley. That's a lot of freezing rain. These are really good probabilities of getting at least more than a trace amount. You're almost at 100%. Then you have about 1/8 of an inch, or I should say 1/10 of an inch. Then you have 1/4 of an inch, and you still have some probabilities populating, although they're not very high. So that's why I personally think that from East Texas through the Gulf Coast like so, where my epic pen is drawn, that's where we'll really need to focus on dialing in exactly where it is we're going to see that transitional point between wintry precip, freezing rain, sleet, all that bad stuff versus the bona fide snowfall and the snow flurries. It's going to be very dynamic, in my opinion, I think. This is a look at the NOAA blend of models. You can see it tracking off through the desert southwest. It gets hung up before we start to see true development down there in the southeast or in the south. And I'll show you the actual models, the 12Z Euro, the 12Z GFS, the 18Z is populating. I'll show that as well, just to be on the safe side. I'll also show a couple of our weather bell models to include the Spire model. We'll see, because I know a lot of folks have been leaning on that a little bit more as it's innovated and advanced. So as I fast forward through time, notice that the NOAA blend doesn't go too crazy with the snow amounts, not in comparison to with Winter Storm Blair. In this case, we're sticking between the 3 to 6 inch totals in your heaviest accumulations. 3 to 6 would be like that pocket there, but on average, we're looking at 1 to 3 inches of snowfall across the board. That's what the NOAA blend is thinking. Obviously, you switch over to other models and you use a different type of method, they're going to show variations in that snow total. If you use the 10-to-1 ratio, it's going to give you a different amount. If you use the Kuchera method and that mathematical equation determining your liquid to snow ratio, then you're going to get different values at the end of the solution. So as you see here, yeah, that's the tool here, Epic Pen. That's the name of the tool, the drawing piece that I use on the screen. So here's the European model, and the Euro has actually been the most consistent and the most aggressive with this next storm system. And it makes sense. We have a lot of energy in the jet stream that's coming down and a large area of temperature discontinuity. That gradient is alive and well. Plus, because the Gulf of Mexico is still a little more warm than traditionally for this time of year, still anomalously warm, that's also going to give us a bit more of a warm air feed, which is also why I'm thinking we don't get as much snow for our Gulf Coast states, but more along the lines of a very cold rain or even freezing rain. And I'll show you the mid-level temperatures as well to kind of break that down a little bit better for you. But there goes our next winter system hugging the coastline of the Gulf of Mexico with a really pronounced freezing rain and rain-snow mix for Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, getting over into Georgia, and then the Carolinas, with North Carolina trying to get in on the snowfall. We could get a little bit of a wraparound effect to the western border of South Carolina, but it does look like North Carolina and Virginia, once again, are going to get in on that snowfall action. If I switch over to the GFS is thinking pretty much the same thing. Thankfully, the models are in unanimous agreement in terms of where we're going to see development, the overall intensity of our low pressure, and then the rain, snow delineation. However, if you notice, the GFS is not as bullish on its freezing rain outlook, which I think is a little bizarre. I feel like we should have a little bit more of a freezing rain indicator on here, because if you look, our skew T sounding is hugging that 0-degree threshold. The surface isn't quite freezing, and the mid-levels are not quite fully frozen over all the way through to where you're going to keep a glaciated snowflake or possibly see snow. I mean, if anything, this could be more of a snow pellet, not a snow pellet, excuse me, an ice pellet type of ordeal. But that's just me looking at the skew T soundings there. If you look over here where you actually have a little bit of that freezing rain popping up on the model, there's your warm layer, albeit a very small warm layer, and then the surface actually tries to warm up a little bit more before you cool off again. So again, this could be one of that mixed wintry precip type of events here. And if you go through much of the Gulf Coast, this is away now from our actual storm. If we go out to, say, northern Alabama, still a decent warm layer out there and a lot of dry air down at the surface. So that's why I really, as the system builds in, there you go. Now we start to see a lot more of that moisture come through, and it tries to transition to snow. But notice that temperature profile in the bottommost portion of this skew T sounding, you have a nice warm layer, and you're very close to, if not right at freezing down at the surface. And that to me says more of a mixed precip / freezing rain, some kind of an icing threat. And I think the GFS is kind of underselling it, maybe enhancing our area with the warm air out ahead of it. Just a little bit too much. based off of this. I mean, you can see all that warm air surging in the mid-levels, and that's what's going to create that warm layer to melt the snowflakes, melt the ice crystals, and create that freezing rain risk. Here's a quick glance at the 18Z GFS. I have not looked at this yet. It just started to populate, so let's see what we got. Yeah, so the 18Z GFS looks to have the system just a little bit more stronger, and the snow has retrograded to the north. Now, that could definitely be a huge issue and hazard for the eastern United States. This here is a textbook cold air damming scenario. So, as we know, we have the Appalachians that run right through here. I'm going to do some different drawings with different colors. Then you have your warm sector, your warm front coming in like so, right about there. And if you look, there's a high pressure here, which means we still have cold air right up against the lee of the Appalachians. And as we all know, cold air is much heavier and much more dense than warm air. So as a result, your warm front is going to get stuck down over the southeast, and it's going to overrun that cold air. You're going to get that really nice warm layer, which is why, bam, as soon as you click one time step forward into Friday night and through the weekend, you can see how your surface warm front gets stuck. It gets hung up over Georgia, the southern border of South Carolina, and as the warm air above it, above the surface at 925 and especially 850, the different millibar levels, that's when you get your warming, you get that freezing rain temperature profile. I bet that the warm layer looks even more significant here. Yeah, and it's a little more higher up too, you can see. So that is definitely a bona fide ice storm / freezing rain event, and it doesn't get very much better from there, especially as the system continues over the terrain down into the Carolinas and the rest of the Mid-Atlantic. We keep that little warm layer working for us. So that's definitely going to be something we'll want to watch for, especially as the system begins to occlude. Yeah, it looks like we start the occlusion process right there. There's your jet. I'll zoom out again so you can see just how raggedy the jet is. I'll go to the North American view. So this is why our winter weather pattern is going to stay very, very excited. I say excited, not exciting, but excited, because if you look, we have this powerful swath of jet energy that's moving through with our next storm system, why it's so robust. Weak minor trough, and then we have a blast of polar front jet energy coming through down the pike just to the south of the Aleutian Island chain of Alaska once again. So this pattern is just going to get crazy. I bet if I were to rewind to 12Z, we can track that through time and see what else is going to happen. Look at that. Yeah, wow. So just beyond that, we get another excessively positively tilted trough with a bit of subtropical influence. If not, that could be the polar front jet interacting with remnants of our subtropical jet down there thanks to the La Nina influence, and as a result, bringing down even more of that Arctic energy. Yeah, look at that. Another big cold outbreak for the East Coast, followed by another big cold outbreak, and then a monstrosity. Obviously, this is 384 hours out, so put very little faith in this. But regardless, the key takeaway here is it's going to be cold for a while. It looks like we're going to stay in a positive PNA for a while. This is a very, very outlandish run of the GFS, by the way. Nobody show this. Nobody screen cap this. If you find anybody on social media posting this, you need to tell them shame on them. Because this is 384 hours out, and this is a wild, wild outlook. There's your 480 thickness line. Your Arctic air is all the way down into Kansas and Nebraska and Colorado. I don't even want to look at the surface temperatures on this, but I'm going to do that anyways just for the fun of it to see what it's showing. Oh, good God. Yeah, look at that. And these are your actual air temperatures. This would be a significant severe weather outbreak if it were to verify. But obviously, we do not show this far out on the GFS because the GFS wants to go absolutely crazy in terms of everything weather-related. As we all know, the Happy Hour 18Z will put a Cat 5 over your neighborhood in the month of January. So that's why you never try to do things like that 200-300 plus out. Yes, icing I think is going to be the biggest risk for much of Louisiana. and the very uppermost border between Louisiana and Arkansas before you fully transition into bona fide snowfall, I think there could be some flurries. There could be. If you look at the Spire model continues to transition it to the north. It leaves Louisiana completely out of it altogether with very, very light accumulation through Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and the Carolinas. Our heaviest snow band is a little more further to the north than all of our other models, especially the GFS. Keeping it through northernmost Texas, a lot of Oklahoma, Arkansas, and then tracking it right through the same general area that Blair just dropped a bunch of snowfall right through there. So we could be seeing a compounding effect, a 1-2 punch for the Midwest, the Ohio River Valley, into the Mid-Atlantic, the upper Mid-Atlantic, from about West Virginia, Maryland, and Virginia itself. North Carolina, the west side, we're going to be watching for that wraparound snowfall, but hopefully the mountains don't play any key or don't play any role in eliminating it east of the higher terrain. And then here's just a quick glance at the European AI model. It doesn't have any snow data. I just wanted to pull this up to show you what's happening at 500 millibars. There's that system that we were just talking about on the water vapor, and out ahead of it in the exit region of the jet where the air begins to diverge at the highest point in our atmosphere where weather is observed to 300 millibars. This is where your area of low pressure down at the surface level and between there and 850 is expected to develop. You can see it right there. As that area of troughing and jet energy digs in, you get right into that area of lift, and there's your low pressure. Because it's literally just stirring the pot. And then it comes across, get another little system there, a clipper system with even more cold air coming down. Wow, look at that. Very, very shallow heights right there. Immense cold air up there near the Hudson Bay area, James Bay, Quebec, Ontario. Oh, yeah, and then even the European AI model has even more cold outbreaks as we go through time with some fairly robust systems that come across. Not nearly as intense as the GFS, obviously. At least it doesn't look like it. Let me see if there is a surface temperature. Here we go. Yeah, not nearly as intense as the GFS, but it does show that we're going to continue to see system after system spilling south out of central Canada through the Great Plains and then back up the east coast. Quick glance at the NAM. This only goes out 60 hours, so we can dial in when the snow is expected to start. For Arizona, New Mexico, it'll begin very late Tuesday into early Wednesday morning. And then Texas and the Texas Panhandle will start to go downhill as we get into very early Thursday morning. Wednesday night into Thursday morning. Do you think East Tennessee will see any? East Tennessee will probably get some more snow, depending on how far to the north that system goes. Over-exaggerate every chance they get, then pass the offering buckets. I'm not even too sure what that comment means, the offering buckets. Are you talking about the goal on the live stream, Frank? Because that was just for fun for some of my dedicated viewers. And if you're saying I'm exaggerating, then you need to hop on some other social media sites ASAP, because it will drive you crazy and put some gray hair on your head. That's for sure. So as you can see, the time frame, we're thinking Thursday early morning is when your icing and your winter weather effects will really begin to settle in for central and northern Texas. So that's when we should be really prepared to try to stay out of the way of everything that's going to be happening on top of the heavy rain risk that southern Texas is going to have to do battle with. I haven't really seen too many people pulling this up, but this is your short-range ensemble forecast. The SHREF usually does fairly well with these type of events, and you can see the probabilities for at least greater than 1 inch are fairly high for central and northern Texas. Gets even stronger as it gets into southern Oklahoma, and that snow band can really consolidate and start to pull in even more cold air with wraparound moisture assistance from your warm sector to the east of where your low pressure is. So all in all, not the most gracious snow signature here, but there are still pretty good indications that we will see at least 1 to 3 inches across where the shades of blue are on your screen here. If you switch over to greater than 4 inches, you can see, bam, pretty much nothing. So we're not going to really exceed too much in the south here. It's going to be cold. We're going to have the moisture, but I don't think it's going to be an excessive snow event like we've seen in the past or as some people are comparing it to. Here's your 12-hour mean snowfall, and you see that the Schreff is thinking maybe 2 inches at best, 2 inches, Oklahoma, Texas, getting into Arkansas. And remember, this snow band is going to just continue to transition off in this direction. So the Schreff is thinking a very, very small trace amount for getting close to the Shreveport area. The Shreveport area, at best, Barksdale Air Force Base. And then up there in the northwest quadrant, the northwest corner of Mississippi, perhaps. And remember, these models, they're trying to show black and white lines, but there is going to be some crossover. It's not, weather never behaves in straight lines. So it could trend a little further south. It could trend a little further north. The models have been locked in on the path of the low. Now the question is, how aggressive is our warm sector out of the Gulf of Mexico, feeding that freezing rain potential? And how much leftover cold air will still be out ahead of this system that can then wrap in on the backside to drop that torrential snowfall, if we want to call it that, that could really put a damper on folks out there in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, further to the north from there, and then Arkansas, southern half of Oklahoma. This is a close-up view of the European model, and the reason I have this pulled up is you can see, well, maybe you can, it might be difficult for you to see, but here is your 540 line where everything transitions to full freezing, your full freezing profile from the surface all the way up. And the reason the 540 line is important is that's usually what's called your rain-snow line. And you can see here, we will have some cold air down at the surface. Again, you don't want to follow a straight black and white, or in this case, a blue dotted line to determine where your snowfall is. But if this were to verify, and if this temperature gradient or thickness gradient were correct, then that means a lot of this is going to be more so rain, and then right in this general area, probably from about the 546 line to that 540 line, could potentially be your damaging, freezing rain and your ice storm risks. So it's going to be a close call. We're going to have to watch this very closely as it sets itself up. Some leftover moisture could try to drop some snow flurries. If you see, it does yank that 540 line back down after it progresses off towards the east, but then it's a game of how much is left, how much lift is still there, how much instability will produce those snow showers. I think here the Kuchera temperature profile does a fantastic job from the Euro, kind of showing exactly what I was just highlighting for you. Like, yes, we have some gratuitous amounts here highlighted, one area indicating possibly 13 inches of snow. I'm not too sure we're going to make it that high, but if you notice where I was drawing that line with the 540 line, that's where your heaviest accumulations are on this model, so it stays out of Louisiana, tries to graze the northwest quadrant of Mississippi, and then disappears for the likes of Alabama, Georgia, and then we can switch over to a view of the Carolinas to take a look. Let's do that real quick. MidAtlantic, where are you? Am I not going to go? There it is. So yeah, the European model does not think we're going to see a lot of snowfall for North or South Carolina. Nothing really for Georgia or Alabama. That heaviest snow band is going to transition to the north. You'll probably get some higher terrain snowfall, extreme western North Carolina, western Virginia, but then we're going to start to backfill on what's already up there for the Midwest. Kentucky, there goes Tennessee, for the person who had asked earlier. Tennessee getting some inches of accumulation there, at least based on the European model at 12Z. I would think a fair estimate, a safe estimate, would be 1 to 3 inches to start off with, and then once we start to get the snow rates dialed in, as it's occurring through Texas, it'll be easier to project that out using the why am I suddenly forgetting what it is? Using the method we call extrapolation. Here's a very, very, very fast glance of the HRRR, and the reason I bring the HRRR up is this is your mid-level temperature, and if you look here, there is a small thermal ribbon, a thermal trough right there along the leading edge of where our storm system will likely be, somewhere down in through here. That's why I drew the L so large, drawing in that Gulf warm, moist feed. And this is where I do believe we could see that freezing rain and icing threat start to ramp up right through there as we start to get into that thermal ribbon going back towards the low pressure center. So it's going to be close. It's going to be very difficult to pinpoint down to the mile or the city or the location where you're standing exactly who's going to see snow, because we're going to have a lot of mixing going on here. We have cold air continuing to funnel back down on the backside of it, warm, moist Gulf of Mexico thanks to our coastal low pressure, and then you have your upper level cold pocket that's adding to it when you go up about 10 to 15,000 feet in the atmosphere. So there's a lot of mixing going on. You can kind of see more or less the same thing on the 3-kilometer NAM right there. Let me go forward a little bit more. There we go. As that low really begins to take shape, there's your thermal ribbon right there once again. And you can see that we are above freezing all the way through here, all the way up into Oklahoma as we get into late in the day on Wednesday. Can't go out any further than that, but it goes to show that your mid-levels will be nearly the same temperature as the low levels. And the reason I even bring that up is because, again, we're dealing with Arctic air, and Arctic air is extremely shallow, and it has a very shallow gradient to it. If you were to look at the dome of cold air three-dimensionally, it slopes back higher and higher, a lot more gradual than if we had polar air. Polar air, not as shallow, not as gradual of a slope to it in the 3-dimension, and so as a result, you're not going to get as much of a potential for widespread sleet, freezing rain, drizzle, all the different mixed wintry precipitation types. But in this case, since we're trying to draw from a warm Gulf, coupled with Arctic air that's still spilling down the front range of the Rockies, you have a very good recipe for that cold air mass that's maybe yay thick to undercut a warmer air mass. I use the term warm relatively also, by the way, folks. I'm not saying warm as in we're going to have 80-degree temperatures on the leading edge of this, but warmer, relatively speaking, undercut a warmer air mass like this. So you undercut it and you put the cold air down here like so, you're going to have all that warm air above it, and that's what creates that potential for freezing rain. So that's why I wanted to bring this up. And then here we go once again. This is going to be for the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. This is as we go through Tuesday. Let me go forward in time so we can get you to the main event. So this will be, we'll go to 6 Zulu here. And this is 6Z at DFW, the forecasted SKU-T. Once again, this here does not scream snow for me. It really doesn't. That doesn't look like a snow sounding. For starters, we're not fully saturated. We still have a little bit of drying, especially in the low levels. A very weak radiation inversion there, as a matter of fact. It looks like the lowest point on, I should say, ground level is a little bit colder than just 100 feet off the ground, give or take. And we actually go against, I should say not against, but we go isothermal from there to where we actually have stability in the atmosphere riding that 0-degree line. So it's very close to not being frozen at all. There's a minuscule warm layer right there, a tiny one. That wouldn't really be enough to give you bona fide freezing rain, but again, the key takeaway that I'm trying to explain here without getting too tired on you guys is this doesn't look like a bona fide snow sounding. A snow sounding, I'll show you. I bet you 10-1 if we go forward, we'll probably see more of an actual legitimate snow representation here. Let's see. There we go. Yeah, now see this, that's snow. That there could definitely be snowfall, which is probably what the models are picking up on. Let me go ahead and see what time this is at to see if it actually matches up with what we're thinking for the event. So this is Thursday night into Friday morning, and I do believe the models are thinking that's when your snowfall could potentially get started down there. Let's see. I need a model that can go out far enough. Let's go back to the Spire really quick. Yeah, there we go. This is 0Z Friday and then 12Z on Friday. You can see the snow is now falling over Oklahoma and parts of northern Texas. So this SKU-T does, whoops, spoiler alert. This SKU-T does line up a little bit more so when we start to see the snowfall transition. So we could start out with an icing event down there or over there, I should say, in the Dallas area, Fort Worth. And then we'll transition to snow. When does it about transition to snow? This could arguably be snow. That's going to be close. I don't like this warming trend in the mid-levels there. But all in all, there's your full saturation. So, I mean, arguably, from about the very end of the day on Thursday, between 8 p.m., maybe 6 to 8 p.m., in the evening time frame on Thursdays when we can start to make that transition to a full snow profile. This is what you want to see, by the way. A little SKU 101. You want all that really good saturation in the mid to low levels of the atmosphere. You want to be well below the freezing line. And you don't want to be fully isothermal or have your temperature gradient going with the isotherms here, because that shows that there really isn't any lift or dynamic mechanism to help produce the precip. Because even though we're not talking thunderstorms, you still need a trigger and a lifting mechanism to get things to, circulate around and produce that precip. It's just snow, wintry precip, as opposed to like a supercell with heavy rain and hail and all that. Same general characteristics apply. So yeah, do I have any questions in the chat right now? Mr. Man JJ, no worries at all, and you're very welcome. Barbara, Time Traveler Karen. When it is just too very cold, these storm threats are always forced out to sea. James David said, what do you mean by that? When you mean storm threats are forced out to sea? Ooh, Barbara, I will definitely make sure to keep you in mind with that shoulder replacement surgery going on Wednesday. Is it this coming Wednesday, Barbara, as a matter of fact? If you wouldn't mind disclosing in the chat, because if it is this upcoming Wednesday, then you should be fine, because this isn't going to get cranking until Thursday into Friday. Now, if it's next Wednesday, you should still be more or less in that recovery phase or that bounce back phase, in the weather department, because this is going to be going on from Thursday, Friday, and then through the weekend as it gets up into the East Coast line. Ice in Shreveport is a possibility, Marie, for sure, based on the soundings that I see. In fact, we can pull that up here really quick, too, while we're here before we segue on over and shift gears. Let's see. Shreveport Regional Airport. Yeah, that is a big icing sounding right there, to tell you the truth. That there is far more bona fide freezing rain Friday morning than anything else. So this actually, if this were to verify, obviously this is a Euro SKU, so take it with a grain of salt. It's still fairly far out. This is Friday. It's only Monday. We definitely have time to dial this in. Don't put any confidence in snow, freezing rain, icing, etc. At least that's my recommendation, rule of thumb. Don't put, because I know everybody watches multiple sources. You don't have to take my word as gospel or like the best snow expert. I'm far from it. There's still so much I'm trying to learn, and going through these winter seasons with you all helps me to continue educating myself as I study up for these discussions and kind of reinforce all that material. But if you see people projecting snow and ice today, tomorrow, take it with a hefty grain of salt, please, because usually our models will not be fully dialed in and ready to rock and roll until they're about 24 to 48 hours out. And that's the same thing with trying to dial in your individualized severe weather forecasts, where you'll see initiation, where the atmosphere will be ready to go, where the greatest risk for the widespread super, all that jazz. But this here for Shreveport, that is a freezing rain profile for sure. That's a thick. In fact, this could be an ice pellet. This could be more ice pellets, truthfully, because this here shows a very thick warm layer. That's from 700 to 850 millibars. So that means that these crystals will have to, or the snowflakes, the crystals, however you want to describe them, they would have to travel maybe a few thousand feet before they hit that freezing layer again. And by then, they will have frozen. That's very interesting, actually. Very interesting. That's a deep warm layer, though. Very deep. So I don't know. That does not look, once again, that does not look like snowfall to me. Let's see if we actually get there as we go through time. There we go. Then we finally transition to snow Friday night. Oh, but then we have a warm surface. Then the surface ends up above freezing per the forecast. Again, don't put all of this into, your bottle or however you want to compartmentalize this as what's actually going to happen. But now that's interesting. We lose the warm layer in the mid-levels, and then the surface can no longer support snow. So that's really interesting. It kind of flip-flops there. That's probably why the GFS transitions everything to rain after a little while as we go further through time. I'm curious to see if the 18Z GFS still has that monstrosity of a cold outbreak down the road. Yeah, actually, the 18Z GFS looks like it completely eliminates the snow for Louisiana, for Shreveport. It keeps it even further to the north. That's a trend north in comparison to the last model run. The last model run actually did bring it in with some of that freezing rain. Now on 18Z, it stays all the way to the north. A little bit more generous on the wraparound snowfall, which is a bit more believable. But again, we'll have to see. It goes to show these are all the huge fluctuations that you're going to get trying to dial this stuff in from so far out. If you look at 12Z on Sunday yesterday, snow a lot less, a lot more to the north. If you go back before that to, we'll say 18Z on Saturday, well to the north of everybody. So it's been going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So let's give it another day or two to dial in the snow forecast, and then we'll really be off to the races, figuring out exactly what's happening. Would it help if all the thousands of Louisiana airboat owners came together and blew the storm along it way faster? You never know. There are folks who genuinely believe that we can steer hurricanes like that. So, stranger things have happened. Matt, welcome in. Hello, the Wizard of Naz. What are the chances for freezing rain in southern Mississippi? The temperatures show cold enough, but only shows rain. I think it'll be more of a rain event for southern Mississippi. Northern half is where you can get that rain, snow, freezing rain mix, but I think the closer you get to the Gulf of Mexico, especially since the waters are warm, you're probably not going to have a freezing rain risk. But alrighty, folks, so with that being said, if you were here for the winter chat, if you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns, stick around, or perhaps drop me a comment in the comments section down below at the conclusion of this live stream, because now we're going to transition, we're going to shift gears. We got to shift gears, and we're going to touch on the tropics for a very brief moment, because today is January 6th, and as promised, despite the disbelief of some who are here for the winter forecast, as we always do every year, well, I say every year, but we've only been doing this for now, this would technically be the second year. We started midway 2023, so we did a 2024, now we're doing 25, so yeah, this is our second year doing this. We're going to shift gears and just rapid fire through some of this data here, because it is fairly interesting. Here are our precip anomalies. And you know what? I'm not going to show this one. I'm going to show the European model here. So first and foremost, notice that La Nina breaks down. This is your sea surface temperature anomaly for January, February, March. Why is this not working? There it is. Finally. Sheesh. January, February, March, April, collapse of La Nina. May, we're starting to build warm anomalies in. June, we're under a neutral pattern. And then by July, more so of a neutral pattern with an extremely negative PDO in the Pacific, which could play a role on things. And a nice warm pool over the subtropics and the eastern mid-latitudes of the Atlantic, which I think could be responsible for creating a lot of fish storm activity this next hurricane season. I really do. I feel like next hurricane season is going to end up being a mishmash of things. I still want us to watch our East Coast folks and the Southeast very closely, but at the same time, I really do think we're going to have hints of 2023 mixed in here based on the anomalies that I'm seeing. If we switch over to the Atlantic, I've noticed a big trend in terms of keeping things out to sea. If you look at May, then June showing anomalies into the Caribbean and then in the Gulf of Mexico, and then July. Notice July is like a dead stick. July looks almost boring, truthfully, in comparison to what we saw leading up to 2024. There's almost nothing out there for July. We have lots of anomalies down here off the Horn of Africa to the south of the Azores, but even that is a little too far south for tropical development. Below average anomalies in the Caribbean. This almost looks El Nino-esque which is very bizarre. And it only gets more bizarre when I show you the actual ENSO forecasts. Here's a look at February, March, April, May, June, July, also kind of giving a European hint at an El Nino possibly trying to sneak in, because if you look, this is as we go through June and July, the East Pacific is looking at enhanced values for potential tropical cyclone activity. Nothing in the Atlantic yet, still Zippo all the way through the month of July. This will probably change as we get into the months of March, April, and May, and we get closer in time. But I thought it was very noteworthy that the Euro seems to be headed in an El Nino type of direction this hurricane season, which is bizarre. We had a very short-lived La Nina, let alone a moderate La Nina, as opposed to the strong that we were forecasting at the beginning of 2024. But now it's definitely, like, look at this. It's definitely thinking we could head back towards an El Nino right as we start hurricane season. This is our SST anomaly for the 3-4 ENSO region. And if you look, by about May, we're crossing the threshold of neutral into a possible weak El Nino, which is maybe why the tropical cyclone anomalies are popping off out there in the Pacific as opposed to the Atlantic. An even greater spread in the anomalies as we go through much of 2025 towards 2026. I mean, look at one of these ensemble members going for a strong El Nino. I should probably, you know what, I'm going to pull up, I don't have this pulled up just yet, but kind of put that in the back of your mind, cement it there. I want to look at the CFS. If the CFS is also thinking the same thing, because I haven't looked at that. We should have a new one of these. No, so the CFS is thinking neutral all the way with El Nino. Well, no, it kind of has El Nino trying to sneak in there by July, August, September, but even that's not nearly as much as what we were just seeing there a second ago. Let's go here. I want to see the CFS. Yeah, so the CFS keeps us neutral. CFS ensemble number 2 keeps us neutral. 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 So yeah, the Euro is thinking we could possibly surge into a weak El Nino and get to that negative 0.5 degree above average for the ENSO region. The CFS, however, and the CANSIPs do not agree with that, so we're already starting to see the butting of the heads between different model entities. So it's going to have our work cut out for us, or we're going to have our work cut out for us as we go through the next 3 to 4 months and we start getting into the point of the year where preseason forecasts start to release. I think maybe that's why TSR is as average as their December outlook has been, because TSR released their first very long-range tropical weather outlook back in mid-December, and they're only going for 12 to 14 named storms this year. They are not thinking anything crazy at all whatsoever. Here's the CANSIPs showing June very quiet, except for maybe the Caribbean. July, lots of a recurving signature there, and then August, that's when it does still look like there's the potential for something sneaking into the East Coast or something like that. Something very interesting. And then September, much of the same, with a lot of the recurvers out there, very reminiscent of what we saw in 2023. The caveat to that is if you look at these very, very below average anomalies, that would suggest that there could be a presence of a high pressure over eastern Atlantic Canada and the northeast United States, which means if these systems coming off of Africa develop quick and catch the ride off, hooray. If they develop slowly like we saw in 2024 and they form here, they could take a nice ride right up into the East Coast like so. So that's why if you watched my first tropical weather outlook, I had this area highlighted in red. I really do think that this is going to be the mid-Atlantic, the upper northeast coastline, and East Coast Florida's year to watch closely, with obviously the threat of something busting through and moving westward into the Gulf of Mexico like we saw a lot of in 2005. 2024 was very reminiscent of '04, so you all know I have that working theory of '05 possibly trying to show very small reminiscence of itself as we go through 2025. What I'm now very curious to see is whether or not we actually get, and then look at October. October is dead. October, it looks like very little to nothing. Lots of very anomalous precip activity through the Atlantic Basin, but we're already well below average, at least according to this iteration of the CANSIPs. Again, these models, they're not to be taken as the end-all, be-all, but it is worth noting. If we come out to the actual ENSO and switch over to the thermodynamics, you can see that the CANSIPs is still thinking we'll be in a neutral pattern, not really an El Nino, but it is anticipating the collapse of La Nina here as we go through February into March and then eventually April, which kind of lines up fairly well with what we're seeing out there right now according to the anomalies. If you look at the chart, our ENSO 1 and 2 region is already kind of warming up. And then we just have our 3, 3, 4, and 4 cranking in the La Nina. Already starting to see the warm subtropics and mid-latitudes forming up there, with cooler tropics and a very warm Gulf of Mexico. Let me close this out and show you. I'll zoom in again. Look at that. Look at how warm that Gulf of Mexico is. That's another reason why I think we're going to have influences on our severe weather pattern as well as the snow forecast for the deep south here over the next several days, and then severe weather for the rest of winter into spring because of how anomalously warm the Gulf of Mexico is. That is very warm. That's easily almost 1.5 to 2.5, if not just shy, in some small localized pockets there of 3 degrees warmer than on average, which will influence your winter weather big time, and it will influence your tornado risk and your severe weather risk, which may be why even just a little over a week ago we had a very El Nino type pattern move through Dixie Alley. Very similar to what we saw 23 into 24. Now under our La Nina, the hot waters are still dorking up our pattern quite a bit. So there you have it. We will do a more in-depth discussion, I promise that, especially since Ethan made us hit that goal right out of the gate. I will save another long-winded discussion for possibly my next day off, Thursday or Friday, give or take, so I have time to put more notes together. I have notes here, but we're already about to bust through the hour threshold on this live stream. I'm starving. I got to get ready for the day tomorrow, get some dinner and meals prepped. Wow. Almost had an aneurysm, and then get ready for some sleep tonight. Yes, Jeremiah Joseph. As a matter of fact, 05 was forecast to be a little lackluster in comparison to what happened. Why do storms start out off Africa? Time Traveler Karen, excellent question, because out there you have what's called your easterly jet in the tropics, and it's a jet stream in the mid to upper levels of the atmosphere that flows east to west from the Indian Ocean through the Middle East, give or take, and then through Africa into the Atlantic. And what happens is you get a lot of thunderstorm and low pressure activity through those other aforementioned regions that eventually get spit out into the Atlantic as waves, and they develop over the hot waters. We can talk a little bit more about that as well during our next more in-depth discussion. But yeah, mark your calendars, pay attention to the notifications. We're probably going to go live again on Thursday or Friday, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth on all the new latest data. We will have the NMME in as well. This has not updated. This is our last one. The North American Multi-Model Ensemble, you can see it's still valid for December. That should populate, I think, on the 8th by Wednesday. So we should have that ready to go, and we can break down all of it and talk a little bit more about what's going on out there in the Atlantic, because I think there's a few things that the models are trying to show us already. Very dominant PDO, negative PDO in the Pacific, and the North Atlantic. These subtropical waters here and the warm pocket in the anomalies in the subtropics and the mid-latitudes tells me that there are wind pattern changes that are going on up there that could influence the overall steering currents, shear, and I'm wondering if we will actually have as much of an issue with the dry air and the wave breaking as we did this hurricane season. Because this past hurricane season, our warm pocket was down here, which is probably why we had such an enhanced subtropical ridge, allowing for the wave breaking to spill dry air in off the west coast of Africa and Spain and kill everything in the MDR, like we saw for much of August and September. This go around, if that warm bubble is further to the north and our winds are subsiding to the north with a negative NAO, what that tells me is wave breaking might not be much of an issue, and we could have another active season just like 2023, where we have stuff popping up all over the place. Possibly. We'll see. We're still very far out, so we're just keeping in the theory realm. We're theorizing together, and that's what we love to do on this channel when we're so far out, is we're just going to theorize. But if you look, the North American model here, as well as the CANSIPs, all showing that's an extreme warm bubble right there for sure for August, September, and then October. So this here will have detriments to our pattern, but then look at these cool anomalies up off the northeast, which could suggest higher pressure there and an escape route early on, but then not so much as they come in underneath that anticyclone up there. You can see it in the upper dynamics as well, the height anomalies. Look at that anomalous ridging up there, strong anomalous ridging in September. That'll be your force field, stopping these things from recurving here, like we saw with Ernesto this year, and Kirk and Joyce doing this. That'll stop them from doing that. They'll end up recurving much sooner, like we saw with Margot, with Nigel, and Tammy from last year, or in 2023. But then they'll also possibly see if we have any formations that occur down in through here, they're going to get forced right in. So there's a kicker there. There is a kicker. We will have an escape route for our long track systems. So if we have a lot of Cabo Verde development this hurricane season coming up, then that won't be as much of an issue. But if we get development like we saw with Debbie, with Helene, with Milton, that's not right. With Milton, with who else? Who else formed down here? There are a few others. With Beryl going through like that, they'll only have one direction to go. So we'll see. Time will tell. Thank you for the update and information that you give, and have a blessed week, and be safe, Barbara. Thank you so much. Why does the rain fall apart when it gets to Central Florida? Most of the time, the last couple of fronts have been coming through in the evening hours when the peninsula has cooled off. So as a result, we haven't had as much energy left over for these showers and storms to hold together. But notice today, the front has come through in the mid to late afternoon hours while there's still some daytime heating in effect. We had a lot less cloud cover early on in the day, so as a result, they kind of flared up as they came into the peninsula, and now they're starting to dissipate. Twilight Firefly 100, so glad I was able to catch this live stream. Always appreciate the updates, David. Have a good evening, everyone, and stay safe. I do completely agree. Thank you so much for tuning in. And that's all, folks. Again, watch the notifications. Check back with me on Thursday or Friday. I may have a community post, or if you can follow me on TikTok, Instagram, elsewhere, I will also notify you through those social media means as well as to when we're going to be back on the channel. And have a wonderful rest of your Monday night, folks. We'll talk to you again very soon. Stay safe if you are in the immediate path of all this wintry weather. And follow me on Instagram, TikTok for other day-to-day, hour-by-hour updates on what's going to be unfolding for the Deep South and the East Coast with these upcoming winter storms. But until next time, time out. Please consider clicking subscribing if you haven't done so already, or if you're brand new to the channel watching this after the fact. I do appreciate all your continued support. Thank you so much for my longtime viewers, despite my absence, sticking around amidst my flying all over the place, trying to get situated with News 6, the holidays, and continuing to buckle down with my military shenanigans and my schooling going on in the background amidst all the other things life has hurled at me. Going to continue to try to stay repetitive with these updates, whether it be live streams, vertical video, short video, and long-form content shot at News 6 on our weather wall like the previous update. Go check that out, see the new format. I had a lot of fun doing that one for you guys. Drop a comment down below if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. Please go ahead and give that like button a little nudge. I see we have over 100 viewers right now. We're only at 59 likes. Let's get those likes up, people. I need some help trying to get this channel back in business, because I can continue to pump out the content, but if we aren't liking and sharing this content and you guys don't take the extra 5 seconds to do that, then this channel will stay dead. And I want us to come back in full swing for a great 2025. I'm going to grind for you if you give me a little extra help throughout the grind so we can all enjoy and build this weather community together. Now, with all that being said, I hope you have a great rest of your Monday evening. I will talk to you again very soon. And until next time, this is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.